Hello, Koenraad Dedobbeleer. Hello, everybody. We are here today to talk about your current exhibition at ProjecteSD. We will be showing images and give our audience some insight into the exhibition through this casual conversation. It looks like the title of the show, The Senseless Momentum of Our Times, was made especially for the moment most of us are living now, the pandemic crisis, or maybe other crises as well. But we know that the title was decided before we knew what was going to happen. Where does this title statement come from? Is it a found sentence, a statement that comes with a particular intention?
I feel I can hardly express about the times we are in. I can, for sure, as an individual, but that's not the point here. As an artist, I feel unable to do so, or not yet, at least. I've never been concerned that much with the latest, newest actuality, and I guess that what we do takes more time, or maybe more distance. My work is not directly about emotions. Of course, what you experience in life is of great influence, with a different life, different background, and would for sure make different work. But it's not about self-expression in a direct, literal sense. Thus, the title of the show is a mere coincidence. Maybe a freaky one, since it now feels like being chosen deliberately as a comment on the latest events. On the other hand, those words seem to make a big, general statement that somehow will always sound true. So by choosing it, I speculated on the fact that they had a great potential for misinterpretation or interpretation. But we can at times hardly make sense of the moment since we are in it, and the reflection is needed in order to make sense of things. That happens just the moment after, I guess. So we are out of the moment when we are able to reflect. Are our times merely a momentum? Hard to say. These words trouble me. I do not really or fully understand them, and I can only speculate on what they are supposed to mean or say. That is likely why I noted them down, trying to pin them down, but thinking of it, I'm still not making sense of them.
You are a contemporary artist dealing mainly with the sculptural objects, but you're also a researcher and even an erudite thinker with a remarkably broad culture of references and influences. There are some works in the show, especially the photographs, that seem to contain some stories that of course escape the visitor who cannot grasp these layers behind. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the ideas in, for example, the photo diptych, the effect of redistribution is often invisible?
I can tell you some of the background of what went through my mind while taking these pictures. And the effect of redistribution is often invisible. The image on the left-hand side shows a fabric based on the drawing by Joseph Frank. Frank was a Viennese architect who started off with the Wiener Secession and evolved to become what I would call a softcore, almost frivolous modernist. As he had some Jewish roots, he felt forced to leave Vienna due to the new regime of the 30s. And after immigrating to his adoptive country, Sweden, he spent some time in New York in 43, 45, thereabout. He would be teaching, but hardly able to practice, so he was silenced into becoming a paper architect, as many emigres of the time. He designed a quantity of the most exquisite textile patterns while living on Manhattan. Most of them included plants, and there's a suite of three that got my attention with rather funny titles: Italian Dinner, Teheran, and Nippon. Back in Sweden, most of these fabrics, or the designs for the fabrics, were put into production by his company Svensk Sten. However, Teheran was only produced in the 90s, some 20 years after Frank's death. I started fantasizing that these might relate to Second World War. Obviously, in its design, it refers to those amazing Persian rugs. But as an Austrian Jew, he might be well referring to the Teheran Conference, held at the end of 1943, where the Allied forces, amongst other topics, laid out their plans for a joint offense against the Nazi, fascist, and Japanese forces. The other half of the diptych depicts 87 Cyrus II amplifier. Cyrus II of Persia, or Cyrus the Great, was the founder of the First Persian Empire. That must not have escaped the company's founder Farhad Azima, who named his son after the ruler and his hi-fi electronics company after the son. Azima, educated in Leeds, via the name-giving seems to stress his migration and cultural background, while he successfully was revolutionizing the oh-so-British field of audiophile electronics. Those early designs of Cyrus and Mission, his other company, were intended to create affordable mass-market products, but adorned with the highest end quality specs. And what those two images do together is purely based on my associations, but I do hope and assume that they do talk to each other and might create a potentially new story.
Koenraad, you're supposed to be a sculptor, but 13 of the works in the show are photographs. 3 sets are diptychs, and what they always show are objects. When you photograph a banal object, like the wedge in the photograph entitled "Most is Not All," or the details of the wood planks of a bridge, the one with title "Something Very Powerful in Recuperating What Power Has Rejected," or the woodcut that resembles a mask. What are you trying to show with these works, to show or to say? Why did you choose these objects?
The photographs are divided into 2 strategies, I think. The colored ones are rather straight reproduction of existing objects. The black and white ones follow a method that is a bit more complicated, although not that much. The principle is simple, I'll explain or try to. The source material for these images was made with my iPhone. They are quick, fairly uncomposed, snapshot-like. Mostly taken as a way to help me remembering something I saw or something I found interesting, like taking a note. I selected images that could be read as afterthoughts or associations on the sculptural field. Most of those had an almost ageless and at the same time an archaic feel to them, being material proof of bygone eras. With an analog technical camera, a CNR P2 4x5 inch to be precise, I re-photographed these images directly from my computer screen. One nearly obsolete reproduction mechanism looking at a current day image generator. That was the thinking. And although what you see are fairly nice framed gelatin silver prints, you might also feel that this sort of image could not be realized with or by the technical camera. They are a bit too free-handed, their focus is off, their kind of gaze seems different. The first image one visitor can encounter entering your space via the hallway serves, I think, as a sort of material proof of that method. An iPhone, on that image at least, and we see an iPhone photographing its own reflection in a computer screen. And that iPhone picture is on its turn re-photographed after it was uploaded to the computer and photographed from that same exact screen. Most of the subjects are indeed pretty banal, but in their simplicity they are also ingenious, I think. The wedge was made by my friend Ambroise Deschy, whom I met teaching in Geneva. He made this wedge for the door of the department's office, and I believe he had no intention of declaring that object an artwork. But by simply adding a metal ring to it, he made it easier to take from under the blocked door. Simple, effective, and beautiful at the same time. I felt I had to honor his effort by showing that I saw what he had done. Maybe the wooden planks ignited a similar appreciation in my mind. The planks itself are part of a small bridge near the weekend house of friends. Their wood is inexpensive, and still somebody took great care to repair those with holes instead of simply replacing them with a new plank.
What about the image that sort of resembles a mask? or the ones with the rural objects just on the opposite wall of the room. Can you tell us a bit about those briefly?
Sure, but what you call a mask is actually a wooden block for wood block printing, to print on fabric to be precise. And it's an ornament that was designed by Mariano Fortuny. But I agree, it looks vaguely ethnographic. And the rural, archaic things, they really are what they are. But maybe in the end they're not so rural, as they were all, except for one, the bridge I talked about, photographed in the Venicity of cities, in Antwerp, Brussels, Paris, Geneva, and even Moscow. I always liked how Isa Gensken talked about photography, that photographing would be like sculpting or carving images out of the real. I got fascinated by the idea that taking a picture is to circle around a subject, which nowadays we can do easily with our telephones. It results in making relatively okay pictures, and it's easy and very inexpensive.
Going back to the sculptures in the show, how do you see the dialogue between the photos and the sculptures around them? The photos all seem to have a timeless quality, even archaic. Some make me think of the surrealism years, whereas the sculptures have a different kind of sophistication. They all have very precise chromatic choices. They are sometimes clumsy, surprising assemblages of different sorts of elements, toys, domestic fixtures, or industrial architectural objects. Uncanny but elegant at once. Can you comment on some of the works in the show? For example, the one titled Proletarian Struggle Devoid of Utopian Aspirations.
I feel that it's easier to say something about the pictures than it is to talk about sculptures. They are mostly done in an almost improvisational manner. What happens when one improvises? To know. The pickled tomatoes and the paprika in Proletarian, they were bought in Vilnius, and I was looking for jars that together would have exactly the same height as the pink H-beam that conceals them. Those pickles can still be bought at the local markets in Vilnius, and usually they are produced by private persons and they are sold ungoverned. Most of the sellers are third-aged, are women, and they have to do this to make ends meet. Their produce is not labeled, nor tested, certified, or standardized. And I'm taken by these forms of mild anarchism. At the same time, we do live in a society that seems obsessed by its own image. Social platforms cater the celebration of the I or the me. Look at me, I am here. That digital revolution happened without me noticing or wanting to take notice. It was there all of a sudden in full force. And I think that, it might be one of the reasons why a greater number of mirrors are appearing in my sculptures over the past couple of years, as a literal way to reflect the given circumstances.
To finish our talk, I cannot avoid asking you about the titles of your works. Philip van den Bosch, former director of the Museum am See in Ostende and now independent curator, once wrote that your titles, and I quote now, they seem to have a vaguely defined relationship to your visual oeuvre. Tell us a bit about your obsession with these long, absurd, sometimes funny but always difficult to remember titles.
Titles come about independently from the works, also from the context or from any meaning. Sure, these words are not meaningless, but in regards to this specific exhibition, they don't give any clue, nor to the reading of the individual works, nor the construction of the exhibition as a whole. At least I'm hoping to avoid meaning by using these loaded long quotes. All of my titles are words that I borrowed from somebody else, and these words struck me while I was reading, the kind of sentence or quasi-sentence that grasps your attention just a bit more than the other thoughts in the same text. And while reading or after reading, I just note them down in my little notebook and keep them safely stored for the future, Whenever I need titles again, I flip through the notebook and pick out the ones that seem to manifest themselves clearly. That's about the principle of it. Fairly simple. I need to say that I stole that idea, or partly stole it maybe, from Mark Nachtsam. And Mark was making these beautiful works with words that he was picking up from magazines mostly. He turned those words into a form of concrete poetry, and I was impressed by his ultra-modest but firm manner. And I thought that this line of work, or his way of doing, might come in handy one day. So I mixed it up with the habit that I got from my high school education to underline while reading. In order to be able to summarize the text or react or criticize to it, we were taught to underline whatever we considered meaningful. I simply started noting down what I had underlined, and afterwards started using those notes as titles. Those words, they title. They kind of give the work a name, but they do not explain. Micheline Schweitzer often told me the anecdote that Konrad Fischer or Fernand Spielmakers, they would refuse to explain a work to visitors or clients. Sure, they acted as mediators, but they would not load the meaning of a work with an explanation of what it was about. I always thought that was a brilliant strategy. Things are things. Just let them be, and let them be what they might be to whomever wants them to be something.
So yes, things are things. A very good sentence to finish. Thank you so much, Koenraad. It's been a pleasure, and I hope our audience liked it too. Thank you all for listening and watching.